Then there's no right or wrong path to go down, but do you believe it's a higher power, or do you believe it's you? Like, do you believe in God?
I'm done. I'm so tired of hustling and chasing money, and I said, I'm just tired.
An American former racing driver, he earned 17 wins in the IndyCar World Series, including the 1985 Indianapolis 500. Sullivan won the 1988 kart championship and placed third in points in 1986. Sullivan also scored a victory in IROC. He competed in the 1983 Formula One season with Tyrrell, scoring 2 championship points. Danny Sullivan.
I think the biggest thing you got to be careful on in social media, if you're going to write something that's controversial, put it out, sleep on it.
Yeah.
Before you do it, because it never goes away.
Yeah.
That story is in the cloud forever.
Yeah.
And, you don't know what might happen later on in terms of job opportunity, career opportunity, relationship opportunity, if you've gone and said something because you were angry. Ultimately, you've got to be pretty true to yourself and not be afraid to say, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
And follow your own path. Not always right, and it doesn't always work out, but you're going to learn from those mistakes and maybe get you back to where there's a path that does work.
What's up, Zen Hard listeners? This episode is sponsored by ZenDrop. ZenDrop has a very special place in my heart, not only because I started the company, but because dropshipping is really a life-changing business for me. You see, I tried tons of things when I first got started, and what I love about dropshipping is that there's always an opportunity to sell a new product to a new person. There's billions of people and millions of products you can sell, and you never need to touch inventory. All you need to do is pick a product, run ads to it, and if people buy it, you make a profit. So if you're interested in getting started in your e-commerce journey, check out zendrop.com and get started today. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Zen Hard podcast. You're going to love this episode. It's with Danny Sullivan. He's most famously known for winning the Indy 500 with his famous spin and win, which you got to check that clip out. I didn't know about it. When I saw the clip, I was like, I can't wait to ask him about it. But there's so much more depth, so many interesting stories that are not just fun, but very inspiring. You guys are going to love this one. Stay tuned, and I can't wait to see what you think.
Perfect.
So 40th year anniversary.
40th anniversary of the win at Indy.
That's how 40 years, man.
Yeah, you're not even that old.
I'm not even 40 years old.
Yeah. So that's how long ago it was. Yeah, 1985.
Does it feel like 40 years?
There's sometimes it does, because I've just been out of the car for long enough now that, there's not a real fresh memory of driving around Indy. But, because it was I'm not saying it's just what everybody says, it was an iconic win because of the spin and the win.
Yeah, it was.
They play it all the time. So it's always coming up. So it's always, somebody's always doing an interview over it or talking about it or sending me the picture of it or sending, hey, can you sign this? Can you sign that? So,
I mean, so I'm not like a racing guy. I never really followed racing, but ever since I met you, I started looking into it a little bit. And prior to this conversation, I started doing a bit of research, and I watched that video. I mean, I'm sure you talk about this all the time, but holy shit. How fast were you going when you spun out?
I went into the corner about between 215 and 220. And
miles per hour?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we were averaging the whole lap, including all the turns, everything. We were averaging around 212 to 214. And so, but, it was one of those things that everybody said, well, why'd you pick turn one? Indy's it's 2.5 miles in length.
Yeah.
Okay. And you got all those grandstands. I think they got 280,000 numbered seats.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge place. And a lot of people pass on the back straight because it's more open and so forth. But going in to turn one's a little bit like going down into a tunnel.
Yeah.
But I was quicker than Mario off of turns 3 and 4. And so I had more of a run on him into turn 1 than I was. We were about equal off of 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I didn't have as much of a run down the back straightaway. And that's why you don't get to pick the places you pass all the time. You got to seek out the opportunity and where he might be a little off. Anyway, that's why one. But when we went into the corner, he's up. So when he comes off of 4, we come down straightaway and he moves over. He's trying to break the draft to get the toe, aerodynamic toe off the car. And he's moving around. And then we go into turn 1 and I'm up alongside of him now. and he just turned. He just took his line and went right down, and the old apron where you warmed up was down there, and I went down below the white line onto the apron. But when I came back up, having completed the pass, when I come back up, it's just enough of a change, and you almost have no downforce on those cars at Indy. There's, so little,
Right.
and it just tripped the car a little bit. The car just started moving at the back, and I kind of tried to correct it a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was about to bite in the front.
Yeah.
And it would have just turned right and gone right into the wall, which we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
And so I just turned back, and I tried to hold it, and it spun. I spun, and I just jumped on the brakes and going around, and I'm like, oh shit, just getting the lead of the Indy 500, and I'm going to hit the fence. And all of a sudden the smoke cleared, and there's the turn 2 sweeps right in front of me. Not right in front of me, but I could see him. So I took my foot off the brake, and now the engine's dead because I just stood on the brake, so it stalled.
Yeah.
And in those days, you had a 5-speed gearbox, 3 speed up gears to get out of the pits.
Yeah.
And then you ran 2 top gears. So it's kind of like, okay, what gear do I take to jumpstart it? Because I could do it and it'll jerk it again, and I'll spin again. And you see me going into turn 2, and actually, if you watch the video close there, you'll see the car just go like that.
Yeah.
And I almost did it again. And anyway, I don't know to this day what gear I picked, but that was the.
So with people that have had like crazy achievements, like, at the highest levels, oftentimes people talk about getting into a flow state, or kind of something beyond them is guiding them. Like, how did you feel in that moment? Like, how do you describe your ability to have chosen the right gear and gotten back and winning it?
Well, you know how I just walked you through how long it took and what we did and this, that, and the other, and so forth. Well, that all happened in about 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think that we're all, you in your way, everybody that's successful, they're blessed. There's something in their mind that makes it function in, whether you're doing a $1 billion business deal or whatever, your mind is always in that gear. It's slow motion, you want to call it, whatever,
Yeah.
And, look at guys who play tennis. They're receiving serves at 130 miles an hour, something stupid.
Yeah.
And they're moving forward to the ball.
Yeah.
I'd be in the parking lot hoping, So everything in it. I remember having a conversation with Larry Bird about it one time, and he could see everything on the court.
Yeah.
He saw everybody moving in different, where they're going to go, do a pass, or, and I think I was just blessed with something that capable to drive, but have the mental awareness at the right pace that happens. It's like fighter pilots.
Yeah.
Those guys are just amazing what they're doing. And it's the same thing that I was born with it. You don't develop it. You develop the skill as you go along, the same way you did in your business. You refine it and learn and refine it and learn, but you've still had to have the basic instinct built into your DNA someplace.
And do you believe that's well, then there's no right or wrong path to go down, but do you believe it's a higher power, or do you believe it's you? Like, do you believe in God?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was born Catholic and raised Catholic and so forth like that. I think it's still in your DNA. I don't think, when they're figuring it out that, this guy's going to be a race car driver or whatever, there's just something in there that I believe that just lets you fit into certain categories. Maybe I could have been a fighter pilot or something else, but there's something in our DNA that I wasn't going to be the most successful hedge fund guy on the planet. It's not my thing. So,
well, you've also become a pretty successful business guy.
Well, I've had some success, but it's I also realized too, in racing, as in most sports, ours is a little bit different. I mean, if we can get eliminated, we can get killed, but if you get hurt, you've got a short window of really your success. Most people don't have super long lifespans or careers in racing. That doesn't mean they get killed. I just mean your window's there, and okay, now you're starting to get too slow.
Yeah.
Next, let's get a younger guy. Same thing. Football. What's an average football player like? 3 years, 6 years, something like that. It's okay. I've got to make a living. How am I going to do it? You're meeting people all the time. Maybe there's an opportunity there. Somebody talks to me about this, that. We talked about Red Bull because of racing. And I'm reading an article. Literally, I was reading an article in the Financial Times, and I see this thing about Red Bull going into America. The guy likes sports, wanted to get into racing. I called a buddy of mine that I raced with at Porsche, who knew him, said, call this guy. Next thing I know, I'm in the guy's office pitching the Red Bull driver search program to this guy, which was a success. But from that, I said, any chance to get a distributorship? Because I figured that's really where the money is, and that's how. So again, it's just trying to progress if and when you get out of the sport. And
when did you realize that you had that kind of it factor? We'll call it the it factor, that whatever you want to call it, the piece of you that can just make it happen. Like, when did you first realize that you had
in the racing?
Yeah, in the racing world.
The first time, it started as a whim. Literally, I was working as a waiter in New York City. And
oh, really?
And a friend of the family, I'd left home. Friend of the family had connections in racing. I'd seen all his pictures. He was a friend of mine's father.
How old were you at this time?
I was 19 or 20 at the time when we really got going.
Yeah.
And because of the lottery Vietnam War, I had a very high lottery number, so I didn't get called up to go to Vietnam. And that Vietnam was the big thing at the time. So, so I kind of dropped out of school and went with a buddy to New York for a weekend. I stayed 2.5 years. You're real tied down back in the day.
Yeah.
And my family saw this guy at a funeral and said, hey, we don't want to be looking for Danny. Here's his best friend's number. Could you find out? We think he's in New York.
Yeah.
And he called, and he used to come there as business. He was an academic pediatrician. Wrote for second largest syndicated columnist in America for Ann Lander.
Who was this?
A guy named Dr. Frank Faulkner.
Okay.
Falkner. And he was with the Fells Research Institute, NIH, National Institute of Health, WHO. I mean, he was a guy. And but he had connections in racing. And I'd seen all his pictures and books when I used to do sleepovers out there with his son. And he said, look, what are you going to do with life in your life? You can't be a waiter the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to go racing. And literally, it was a 2-beer comment, you know. We were having a beer, and I just said, I want to try my hand at racing. I want to go racing. He says, lost so many friends. I'm not going to help you. Eventually, I talked him into him, and he called Jackie Stewart, who he knew very well, and Jackie said, well, send the lad over to Jim. That was Jim Russell from the Jim Russell Driving School, and let's find out if he's got any talent.
Had you done any racing prior to going there?
Never been to a race.
So it was just an idea and then...
And a whim.
And then and that was in England, right?
Yeah. So he sent me... Well, at the time, Jim Russell didn't have the schools in America. Don't forget, this was 1971. Well, it was 1970, but it morphed into 71 because in those days you had to be 21 to drive unless you had parental permission, which I wasn't going to get. Okay, that wasn't happening. And so they sent me for my 21st birthday. He sent me to Jim Russell to find out if. And I tell you what, Jared, they have these little Formula Fords, little open wheel, 1600 cc, 100 horsepower engines on road tires.
For context, how much different is that than like the big league cars?
Well, it looks like an IndyCar, but it looks like a baby IndyCar.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, it's just Formula Ford. That's like Ford Motor Company.
Gotcha.
Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1. Those are the stepping stones, or they were at those days.
Yeah.
There's now different formulas in the middle of them and stuff like that. But, and it's still to this day where all the young drivers go.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they go-karting and then they go to Formula Ford because it is fantastic racing. It's close. It's wheel to wheel.
But how much slower is Formula 4 than Formula 1, for example?
Oh gosh, you know.
Like, it's a whole different ballgame?
Yeah. Well, nowadays I think they're up to about 150, 160 horsepower, but a Formula 1's just shy of 1,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Difference.
was an, but they're stepping, but they have no aerodynamics,
Right.
no wings,
Yeah.
small tires, smaller brakes, smaller everything. So the sensation when you're racing with somebody is the same. So I know you've got a GT2.
Yeah.
Okay.
GT3.
Sorry,
Yeah.
GT3. But if you put all the GT3s together and then you put a GT2 in there,
Yeah.
it's just that bit quicker.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the next spec, it's faster again.
Right.
So it's all relative in a GT3 what you're doing with the other guys. And but I will tell you, the first time I drove the car, you drove over here in your GT3 faster than I drove this car the first time I drove it. Okay, because
Yeah.
you imagine you, me, everybody shows up,
Yeah.
gets in the car. Nobody has any experience.
Right.
So they can't let everybody just, well, go as fast as you can, have
Right.
fun.
Right.
No.
Too dangerous.
Too dangerous. First time I drove the car, it was like, I was hooked. It was like somebody just, everything I
You're
ever
like,
wanted
I
to
love
do.
this.
I just love it. But the caveat that they made with Dr. Faulkner was, if they say I had talent, we could pursue it. If they didn't,
Yeah.
I'm going back to university.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jim said one of the best we've had come through there.
Wow.
Now I think he told everybody that, so they'd keep coming back.
Yeah.
But with their relationship, and that's where it started. But here's the other problem. I was a waiter. I got like $600 bucks to my name.
Yeah.
Frank's an academic pediatrician,
Yeah.
so he's not got this big private practice where he's
He's
making.
not loaded.
And so we started mainly through his contacts, but it was a hustle to try to find, can we get $15,000 here, $10,000 there, the whole 9 yards. I lived in a boarding house for a year
In England?
in England, and £8 a week, £8 sterling, which in that time was about $20 a week for room and board. That was meals as well. Okay, so you can imagine a lot of beans on toast.
Yeah.
And but it was other guys trying to be racers.
Yeah.
So it was just fascinating because we were all at different levels.
Yeah.
There was one guy that was pretty experienced. And I said to him one time, how come you're, still living in the house? He said, don't want to move.
Yeah.
He said, it's too much fun
Yeah.
because, you sit around with a bunch of like-minded people having tea and it wasn't a big booze up or anything like that. I mean, we'd sometimes go to the pub, but it wasn't that kind of a scene. It was just,
Yeah.
you're talking, you're reading the magazines. Oh, what happened what at this race? And again, remember something. Well, you can't because you're too young.
Yeah.
But back then, you only had like 2 TV channels
Right.
at the time. There, you had 3 in America or something like that. So it wasn't like you sat around and watched races and tapes, and we weren't streaming, and
Yeah.
we didn't have anyway. And so it was an all-encompassing about racing. And the one thing about England is from a road racing perspective, England's the melting pot.
Really?
I raced against everybody from every walk of life, every nation, every country, every place. They were there. Kiwis, Aussies, Japanese, you name it.
Yeah.
They were there. Okay. And it was just, and all the teams, most of the Formula One teams, all but 3 Formula One teams, all but 3 are based in England.
Oh, wow.
Within 50 miles of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you were just in it. You were in the environment. You kind of like your life shifted from I don't know what I'm doing to I'm racing.
I'm racing, but I got to raise a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It's all relative. It wasn't a lot relative to now.
Yeah.
What the number is, but also relative to it. It was
Right.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you weren't going to be on TV. You weren't on the internet. We used to send out little press releases, and when they got faxes, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Instead of mail and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, but so it was just all those stepping stones of learning. And I think the one thing that a lot of racers nowadays, I have the problem with, not problem, but I have this discussion with a lot of the young guys. Yeah, you're working out in the gym and you're doing all this stuff and you're on the sims and you're training and all that stuff. But what about the marketing? Because just like we were talking about George, trying to raise the money for your dream.
Yeah.
Most people don't have it. And by the way, you're racing against a guy that does.
Right.
And dad's willing to pay for it.
And you need the money, I'm assuming, for the car, the travel.
Rebuilds, parts, engine rebuilds, tires, oil, everything.
How'd you raise the well, actually, before we get into that, how long were you in that school and that environment before you actually had a competitive race?
Well, the school was an 8-day school that they probably could, because it was called an overseas school.
Gotcha.
So that was for people that came from, so they had to make it. We didn't drive for 8 days, trust me. I wish we had, but they didn't give us that much track time.
Right.
But you had some different things, and they take you here and they take you there, and then you graduated. But to get a license, you had to do 6 races. I think it was 6 races, and they had to be on 2 different tracks. So you couldn't do all 6 just at the school.
Gotcha.
They wanted you to go to another track, and it was a really funny. It was a really funny story, if you don't mind me. So because Frank was very connected to racing through his connections, he was best friends with Ken Tyrrell, and Tyrrell owned a Formula One team that Jackie Stewart won all 3 of his world championships with, and so I would work on the weekends with them. I'd go to the races just as a gopher, pushing tires around, wiping the car, cleaning, doing everything as a favor. And I went to most of the races that I went to. I didn't go to all of them. I went in the transporter.
Oh, wow.
With the truck drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, who were mechanics as well. But I'd ride in the truck with them. And it was a great experience because you're traveling through Europe with all the crossing the borders, with all the paperwork and the carnets. And I mean, I could sit here and tell stories about that. And then I worked right down from the shop at a place called Bell & Cole. It was a Lotus Alfa Romeo dealership, and I was pumping gas and greasing cars.
Yeah.
That's basically what, for 20 quid a week.
Yeah.
It was all under the table because it was, they couldn't pay me. I didn't have the papers. Anyway, and I was working there one day, and a buddy that worked in there too, he had a motorcycle. And he came in and he says, "Hey, I got this girl. I got a lunchtime date with her. Can I borrow your car to go?" And I'd bought a Lotus Cortina.
Okay.
For 400 pounds.
Okay.
From the dealership. And we'd borrowed the money and got this car. And that was after pubs closed, a half hour out pubs closed at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
At 11:30, I'd go out on the back lanes, and that's how I used to practice. I'd drive as fast as I could down these lanes at 11:30 at night.
Like public streets?
Yeah, but they're all back roads. I mean, I don't know if you've spent much time in England, but when you get in the countryside, I mean, some of the roads aren't much wider than from me to you right now.
Yeah.
And but what a fabulous and so this buddy said, "Oh yeah, I'll borrow the car." And anyway, I said, "Okay, I'll take the motorcycle." And I said, "Give me your helmet." I couldn't get it on. It was too small. I couldn't get the helmet on. So I thought, well, I'm just going to meet the Formula One mechanics at this pub for lunch. And when I say the pub, nobody's drinking. It was just where you could go.
Right.
Because they didn't have diners and all that stuff at the time. So we'd go down the pub. So I went the back way to come back to ride the motorcycle back to the dealership. And I missed a corner going too fast, hit a little farm track Jeep road, hit the center part of it, launched up out of the thing, landed on my head, broke my neck.
Oh my God.
In a field. And luckily, and this road is not as big as this table. Okay.
Yeah.
But luckily, the mechanics from the Formula One team were coming back that way because their shop was only about a half a mile away. And it was the fastest way back. And they saw the smoke out in this field.
Oh my God.
And they go, "What's that?" And they stopped and came out and they found me. So anyway, but I was supposed to do my second race that weekend to get my license at a different track. And so I got out, they took me to the hospital, spent the night. I got out of the hospital. I left. I just left because I thought, I got this race. I can't miss this race. And I'm broken, still broken now. It's C5 to this day. And I go back and I'm now in an apartment with 3 girls. It was, okay. And I go in and nobody's home. It's 1 o'clock or something, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I get in the bathtub because they don't have, England, not many places had showers.
Yeah.
I get in the bathtub. I can't get out. I broke a neck. I can't push like this, like that. I can't put any pressure on. I couldn't roll over. I tried to roll over and push up. I stayed in the bath for 3 hours till they came home from work. And I said, hey, I've got a problem. and needless to say, I couldn't do the race on the weekend. I raced the Cortina at Brands Hatch about a month later, taped up the headlights and entered it in a race down there. But I had more.
So you almost died.
Well, I don't think so.
Maybe not almost, but like.
But it's still broken, C5, and it's
you still have pain at all?
I sometimes get a stiff neck from, and they were careful. I had a big crash in IndyCar, and what was it in '95 at Michigan, missing somebody else, and I had a big hit. I had a sustained hit at 71 negative Gs.
What does that mean, 71 negative Gs?
Well, do you know what a negative G is?
No.
G. So that's the gravitational pull against your body.
Gotcha.
So if you're going around the corner in your GT3 really fast and you're really leaning over, that's a negative G. Okay. Fighter planes and F-18, F-35 and everything, the computer won't let them pull more than 9.6 negative Gs because they black out.
Yeah, and that's when their face is all like
I hit 71.
Oh my God.
Gs.
That's how bad the negative Gs got from hitting the wall.
226 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
And then I had 2 spikes at over 160 because we got a black box in the 160 Gs.
Oh, wow.
In the black box. But I was unconscious for 11 minutes, and got air vac to the. But luckily, one of the greatest creations in racing was the IndyCar safety team. And they created the safety team, doctors, everything, trucks, everything, all personnel, traveled to every race in the world. Yeah. In the world. Same people. So so they knew everything about me. Yeah. They knew I had a broken neck. So they had to cut me out of the car and get something on my back because they couldn't revive me. So they can't just, if somebody had picked me up, I could have been paralyzed or worse like that if it just happened in Brazil or something like that. So anyway, I'm not picking on Brazil. I'm just saying as an example. But so that changed a lot of things in my career.
When was the moment that, so you're in England, you finally get the second race done, you get the license. Are you still working? Like when did you finally go all in on racing?
Well, then I came back. Once I got that license, I came back to America, traded it in, and because I had a British national license, it was good for a U.S. international license. So I traded the license, got that, then I could go back to England. But I worked that winter trying to raise money. We were trying to hustle money to go, now, okay, I love this. I got to do it. Now the hard part is, okay, how are we going to pay for it?
How much money did you need to raise back then?
Don't laugh. I did the first year in Formula Ford, 1972. I started 52 races because sometimes you'll have a heat and then a final. Yeah. And then because England's so small, you might race someplace on Saturday, go to a different track and race on Sunday.
Same car?
Same car. Yeah. Just load it up and take, because it's so small. That's why everybody comes there. It's like a melting pot.
Right.
So I started 52 races, and including living, everything, I spent $15,000. Now today, that same program would be $300,000.
Gotcha.
To do
what does someone that sponsors you get out of it? Do they get a percentage of the winnings?
Well, they more get, we're helping you out type of thing. And I was lucky, and this was one of the big lessons that I'd learned from Jackie Stewart being a gopher for the team in Formula One. He kept, he was the first true professional race car driver. He understood the corporate side. He's with Rolex still to this day.
Oh, wow.
Ford Motor Company he was with for God knows how long, Goodyear, everything. But Jackie was the first one. You know, the guy started 99 Formula One races. 99, that's all. He started 99. They didn't do as many as they do now, but 99 Formula One races. He won 3 world championships, but he won 27 of the 99 Formula One races. 27.
Yeah.
I mean, that percentage is, Fangio was better. Fangio started 52 and won 26.
How many people are in these races?
It varies, but most of the time nowadays there's always 20.
Okay.
But some of the fields would be bigger or smaller and stuff like that. But I learned so much from Jackie. So I'm at a race at Silverstone, and I'd gotten through Tyrrell and some other people that Frank knew. I'd gotten into this one team, but I bought the car, had to help build the car, all that sort of stuff, and I'm paying for it.
Yeah.
Okay. But they got 2 factory cars that are sponsored by a company called Katnick Steel Lintels. It doesn't mean anything to you. A steel lintel is door frames, window frames, all that kind of stuff. So I'm working on my car. The 2 factory drivers, if you like, the works drivers are over here. They're working on their cars all painted up, orange, black, white, Katnick, on it. And they're working on the car. And 2 kids come by and they ask them a couple of questions. And it's like, hey, I'm working, don't bother me. They came over my car, so I'm like, yeah, okay, this. They're nice. They're kids. They're like 6 and 8.
They're just interested.
They're just interested.
Intrigued little kids.
Yeah, and and Jackie said it's always easier to be polite and nice to people and stuff like that. So anyway, I do the race. I beat the 2 works cars. I finished 5th.
Yeah.
It's like my 3rd race.
Yeah.
Go to the factory on the Monday morning, and the owner calls me and says, hey, come into the office.
Those kids.
He says, Katnick's going to sponsor you.
Wow.
And I said, really? Which is a big deal,
Yeah.
And I said, really? Great. I mean, they're not paying me a wage. They're going to sponsor the car.
Yeah.
I said, wow, fantastic. I said, can I ask why? Because I didn't do that good.
Yeah.
He said, those 2 kids you talked to? That was Catherine and Nicholas. That was Katnick.
Wow.
And they were so impressed that they went back and told their dad.
So just being nice to those 2 kids was a big break for you.
So you asked me, the original question, sorry we got sidetracked, was how did you ever know? You never know. There's always stepping stones. You go up, you do pretty good for a race, got a sponsor.
Yeah.
You do pretty good for a race, no sponsor.
Yeah.
No race, you're in the doldrums. So your careers are like, nobody goes like that.
Right.
Maybe if they've got unlimited funds.
Yeah.
But
even
you
so,
always hit.
Even so.
You hit roadblocks.
All the time.
You had failures.
Yeah.
The reason the failures helped you be successful because you made those failures. Same thing. And I don't think, even when I got into Formula One before IndyCar, and I got into IndyCar, and even when I won the Indy 500, you kind of go, okay, you've made it in a sense that you've accomplished winning races and winning the Indy 500 and so forth. But there's always the pressure.
Right.
Because you don't keep delivering.
Yeah.
You're done.
What's next?
Yeah. You're out. You're gone. It's all about performance, which it should be.
How do you, I'm assuming there was many times along the path where there was a lot of doubt that crept in or fear, uncertainty.
All the time.
How do you navigate that?
I'll tell you a story. So we'd done Formula 3. I didn't have the money to do the first 5 races, finally raised the money. So I got on the team, only lost the championship by 10 points.
Okay.
And won a bunch of races after that. And the top 8 guys in the championship, this one Formula 1 team, was called and gave them all a test drive.
Yeah.
Formula 1 team. I was like, I didn't get the call. And I finished second in the championship.
Yeah.
I didn't get the call. But Frank, Dr. Faulkner, knew the gentleman that owned the team and called him and said, hey, just no pressure, just want to know. And Frank was so diplomatic and good. Why didn't you ask? And he says, well, we don't really think that he had the talent to do it. And, that becomes like a red flag. Then it's motivation. And later on, the gentleman said, he said, I was wrong. He said, you were the only one in the group other than the guy that won the championship, but he died from cancer.
Yeah.
He got cancer. So he said, we were wrong. But it's just somebody's opinion.
Yeah.
How many deals have you looked at and you go, yeah, no.
Right.
And then you look back and you go, that one hit it. And you go, gosh, what didn't I? But for me, it's kind of like, okay, what's the problem? What do I need to change to make them or the next person? Because if he's thinking that, so might be one of the other teams.
Right.
In any category. It doesn't matter what category.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, when they hit these types of roadblocks or, when they're along their journey and they have fear or they don't know what they're going to do, they kind of get paralyzed. And I notice people that are major achievers in anything don't really get stuck in that rut for too long. They kind of figure out how to change their minds. Is there any kind of methods you have, or is it kind of just naturally who you are? I was
just competitive.
Yeah.
Just naturally competitive.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
And
was there ever a moment where you were just like, this is over for me, there's no way I can?
Well, there was, but it had more to do, like everything. It had some success. Now I'm in between. I was in between Formula 3, Formula 2. I'd come back and race in here. I was working 3 jobs.
How old were you at the time?
I was 29.
So you had been in the racing scene for almost 10 years.
I'd been
now.
hustling money. Everybody I met.
Yeah.
Hey, Jared, by the way,
yeah.
do you want to go? It was that kind of, because if I didn't have the money, that's what you had to do. And I got jacked around. People promised me stuff. I mean, I could even tell you a famous name, and the guy promised me everything. I got him all tickets to a Formula One race, which was hard to do. The guy didn't even show up, and I hustled, used all my creds to try to get these passes. And you learn that people are just, people change their mind. I'm not calling them names for doing it.
Yeah.
But I'd had more downs than you have ups.
Right.
And I was working 3 jobs, and I was tired of chasing money.
Yeah.
And I was going to go work. A buddy of mine was working on one of those crab boats up off Alaska.
Yeah.
Where it's dangerous as hell.
Yeah.
But you make a lot of money.
TV show about that, right?
And and I thought, I don't have to be on a phone.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to anybody else.
Yeah,
I don't want to
catch some crab, make some money.
And then a guy who I kind of call my Renaissance man, the guy's name was Garvin Brown, and he was heir to Brown-Forman Distillers, which owns Jack Daniels, Veuve Code, Early Times. I mean, just goes on and on.
Yeah.
They got 30 brands, 40 brands, whatever. And Garvin I'd met through a friend. Even though I was from Louisville, he's from Louisville. I met him in L.A.
Right.
Through a friend. And he used to come back for the board meetings. So he'd always take myself and girlfriend to dinner. And he said to me, he called and he said, you kind of sound flat.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm done. I'm so tired of hustling and chasing, money. And I said, I'm just tired. I've had it. And I wasn't getting anywhere. And I'm thinking, shoot, I'm about to be 30. And he said, you got anything going? And I said, well, these guys called me about coming out to Riverside, California, and they wanted me to do this Can-Am thing. He says, well, come on out. He says, let's go take a look at it.
Yeah.
And I said, Garvin, I don't have the money to buy the airplane ticket to get out there, And he goes, no, I'll buy it. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of all that stuff. So I called my dad. Now I'm back in okay graces with him.
Yeah.
And I told him a story. And I said, will you guarantee my credit card if he doesn't pay it?
Yeah.
And he was like, and you're in the so far in the back of the bus, you're almost out the back. You know, the ticket was like $300 or something. So I go out, met with him, stayed one night. He lived in Beverly Hills. Stayed one night, and we go out to Riverside to see this Can-Am. And it was not. I said, I don't want to drive that thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm just going to look bad.
Right.
It's one thing about I'd drive anything, but sometimes you're just going to look bad.
Was this a racing car?
Racing car, big Can-Am car. It's a purpose-built, small block Chevy, full body open cockpit. So you sit in the middle,
Huh.
a big aerodynamic body over the thing, and they're fast.
Yeah.
And so we had stopped at this hotel on the way back in. I said, I want to introduce you to a couple people. Well, I knew Mario Andretti, and I'd met Mario, and I'd been up to his place up in Pennsylvania, and Mario and I had a good relationship, and there's a long backstory to it, but I won't bore you with that detail. And Al Unser was in. They were both standing in the bar, getting ready to go have dinner. And I went over and we said, hey, and I introduced him to Garvin. I said, hey, excuse me, I got to go to the bathroom, which was legit. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And Mario says to Garvin, he says, what's your relationship? And he says, I'm trying to help Danny and stuff. He says, you help him. He's good. He's a good.
Wow.
So
coming from him.
And then from Al Unser said, yeah. He says, I know Danny. He raced against my son.
Yeah. And
so he said, help him out if you can. So we're driving back in from there, and he tells me, he says, I've decided I'm putting you on a retainer, and we're going to go racing.
Wow. And
I'm driving going, what? He says, yeah, retainer. And I'm kind of like, how much we're talking about here? And he said, well, how about we start at 25,000? I didn't want to be really say a month or but anyway, because this is back in the day. I said, oh man, we're fantastic. And then we looked around. We went to England to look around at a deal over there for Formula 2, and I took him all around. And eventually, we passed on a deal there. We couldn't get everything to work, and so it looked like it was done. And then I found another deal put together. It was a disaster. They wrote a book about it. It's some guy that followed us.
Yeah.
It's just called Fast Lane Summer.
Okay.
And it was the story because these guys were a disaster, and the car was terrible. And I talked Garvin into buying a car from the Lola distributor. This is a big distributor, racing car manufacturer, not like a Porsche, but but a really good. And these guys were trying to get me out of the team because they were on this gravy train, like they didn't want to get off.
Yeah.
And Garvin, to his credit, he fired everybody right there in the parking lot at a racetrack.
Wow.
And the transporters there, nothing's loaded up or anything. And they all left. Everybody left. Just drove off. And he turns to me and he goes, well, what the are we going to do now? And I said, we're going to load this truck up. I got 3 guys that are flying in to turn this thing around.
Yeah.
We got a new car.
Yeah.
And we're going to load this truck up. And he said, well, how are we going to get it to Chicago? I said, I'll drive it. And it's a big semi. And a buddy of mine, I mean, if you knew the names, but if I said the names, it wouldn't mean anything. But if you were in, and a buddy of mine and Garvin and he had a buddy with him, we loaded the truck, got it all loaded, and they had gone to a meal. They had gone to have lunch. We'll go back because they'll be struggling, and we'll make another deal with them. And I'm driving the truck down this 2-lane road. They're going back to the track, and I'm just honking the horn like that. I go back like this, giving them the bird. We go to the next race, got the new car. The 3 guys I got came in from California. We went to Brainerd, Minnesota, out there, sat on the pole first race, starting first position.
Yeah.
And they left the skirts down. These were ground effects cars, and you had to put the skirts down because when you drove the car around in the paddock and everything, you didn't want to scrape them up. But when they went on the track, they were literally skirts to keep the bottom of the car sealed to the track so the air wouldn't come out the side.
Yeah.
And one of the mechanics that never worked on it forgot to put them down.
Oh.
But so I had to make a pit stop, and I came all the way back through the field, and I think I finished second or third, and then we started winning races and everything, and that was it.
What series? Like what class of race?
It was
that?
Can-Am, which was these major. It was one of the best series that I ever drove.
So it was a big deal at the time.
Big deal, yeah.
And were you on a team of were there other drivers, or was
no?
it just
We were
you
the
and
only. I was me,
and then the mechanics and the helpers.
Mechanics and Garvin was a thing, and we had but the Can-Am series was a traveling, went around all these races, and Well, most of the teams were California based.
Yeah.
Paul Newman had one of the teams and stuff. We'd go to these races back in mid-Ohio, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, Brainerd, Minnesota. We'd just stay out on the road.
Yeah.
So everybody knew. So after the race, nobody was getting in their jets flying off any place.
Yeah.
So the whole paddock, everybody, all the teams, everybody, we'd have the booze and cook the burgers and stuff like that. Budweiser would supply the beer. And we'd all stand around till after the race, win, lose, or draw with everybody. We got to know everybody that way. And then we'd travel to the next race and we'd do it again.
How often were you doing races at the time?
Well, it was sometimes it was every week, sometimes it was every 2 weeks.
Wow.
But we'd stay on the road. We'd stay back east for about 3 months, 2.5 months, 3 months.
How are you staying in shape or training
So I was one of the guys early on. Read an article. I'm not the most prolific reader, but I'm reading an article, and it's about how physiologically our bodies at 29, 30 start going down. Okay. And nothing we can do. It may be 31 for somebody, but around that age, we all start leaving. And I thought, I'm racing against these guys that are 17 years old, 18 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm almost 30.
Yeah.
I better get in shape.
Yeah.
And so I was playing squash in England because there was a squash court near where I lived, and I could get in for not very much. And I had one of my sponsors from BP. The guy was a really good squash player, so he'd take me to play squash, and I ran and did the stuff and so forth. And so I started researching what I had to do it. So I started this stuff before. I mean, Michael Andretti and all those guys used to laugh at me about all this. In the end, I had trainers and stuff like that to get and stay in shape. And the big thing was not, the funny part, it wasn't just about physiologically going, but think about this. You're traveling all over the world later on. I mean, as I got more successful, now you're doing races in Japan, the next races in Europe, back in the, you're traveling. Okay. You're driving a race, so you're 3 days at a racetrack, wearing your body out, all this sort of stuff. You're making sponsor appearances. You're doing this, you're doing that. Your schedule is nonstop all the time. You're wearing yourself out, not sitting in an airplane. What it's doing to your body, just from dehydration, et cetera, et cetera. So I just thought, well, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to stay at the top of my game, then you get into a race. And I had one of the fastest Indies that they'd run for a long time. It was still 3 hours and 22 minutes.
Wow.
And there's no relaxation.
Yeah.
Pit stops aren't like, oh, I'm going to come in gently. It's more intense than almost doing the race.
Yeah.
So you think about that, what you're doing. You have to stay top shape for late in the race. Some of these races, place like Toronto, Mid-Ohio. Take Long Beach. The Long Beach Grand Prix, okay? Just for example, Long Beach. These aren't paddle shift. They're not automatic or anything like that. In Long Beach, 3,800 gear changes in a race.
3,800?
You're going up or down every 2 seconds.
Wow.
Now, sometimes when you're on the straightaway, you come out of the hairpin, for example, your hairpin there was first gear. So your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, down. Fifth, fourth, second, boom, through the corner, back up,
wow.
down through for every lap. And
how many pounds of pressure do you have to put on the clutch for a car like that?
Don't laugh, but once you get rolling, you don't use the clutch.
Oh, really? You're just good at you.
Well, it's timed to the RPM.
Right. If it's at a certain RPM, it slips into the gear.
It goes in.
I do that with my car sometimes.
Yeah, you can do it in. Yeah, I can do it in almost any road car.
Yeah.
But you got to get kind of up in the power range, if you like. So if the red line say 6,000, you want to shift. It's usually going to be 5,200, something like that. It'll fall in.
Gotcha. So you're not really using the clutch at all in these, right?
Pit stops and to get going.
And
then I use sometimes the clutch on downshifts.
Yeah.
Because they're straight cut gears.
Right.
So it's to save the dog rings and everything that are in there. I would use the clutch a little bit on the downshift, because it just saves the gearbox more. And it's almost sometimes harder to match it on downshift because you got to get the speed and the RPM right. So that's
Right.
why the clutch they'll help a little bit. In fact, the Meadowlands, this would have been maybe 86. I think it was 86, Meadowlands, and I won the race. Second lap, the clutch went, gone.
Oh,
no
wow.
clutch. So I did the whole
On the
race.
second lap?
On the second lap, I did 2 pit stops with no clutch.
Wow.
So I'd come into the pits, knock it out of gear. They come in, they jack you up to change the tires and
Yeah.
put the fuel in. And I said, just tell me, I told them this before I came into pits. I said,
Yeah.
I got no clutch. Just tell me right before you're about to drop the jack.
Yeah.
And I'd jam it in second gear and it would go. And then they'd drop it and go, ta-ta,
just go.
ta-ta,
Yeah.
ta-ta, ta-ta. Well, once it's rolling, then I could pull it back into first gear.
Wow.
So I made 2 pit stops like that. And
won the race?
And won the race.
Wow.
And it was, anyway, some funny stories with it. But so you can do it, but I was lucky I didn't stall it.
Right.
Because to do it one time's one thing, to do it 2 times was even
Yeah.
a little bit more luck. But they no power steering, no power assist brakes.
So
Nowadays,
there's a lot of work.
leg pressure on the brake pedal was just, and those
How often are
steel
you
brake.
hitting the brakes on these races?
Well, on a road course like a Long Beach or Meadowlands or something like that, hell, you're in them hard. Indy, you only use them coming into the pits.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
You only
Right.
because you're almost wide open in top gear most of the time.
Right.
And then at Indy, we would run. I mentioned in the spin how it had 3 speed up gears to get out of the pits because you gotta accelerate up to get to the speed, because don't forget the gears that you've got in it are running up in 220 and stuff like that. But you can't do that, otherwise you'd be going out of the pits like you take it off in your GT3 like in 4th gear,
Right.
5th gear, it'd be
Exactly.
like that.
And then we get
You want to accelerate. But we ran 2 top gears in those days. They were about 250 RPM different, so that if you were racing a guy, you had it a little bit more RPM.
Yeah.
And if you were running by yourself and you were in a groove to save fuel, so you'd be just a little bit off. Because don't forget, in those days, we were doing about 1.8 miles to the gallon, 1.6, 1.8 to a gallon.
Wow.
Okay, these things
Just
sucked it down.
burned.
When I stopped IndyCar, we were running just shy of 1,000 horsepower
Wow.
in a 1,560 pound car.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah, and as you get to drive them, you're after you're used to the power, you're trying to mash the gas pedal through the bulkhead. You're just come on,
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Can
someone like me, theoretically, if you said you put me on a track with one of these types of cars, can the average person who knows how to drive stick get the thing around, or is it?
It'd be a little hard to get it out. You could drive it. The biggest issue is not the shifting or any of that. It's the tires, because the tires are built to get up to a certain temperature, and then they operate really well.
Right.
I mean, they're sticky
Yeah.
almost, but to get them up to that temperature, you got to go fast.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's the hardest part.
Ah.
So I don't know if you ever watched any of the races in Formula One where they have the tire warmers,
Okay.
and then they'll take them off. If you could use a tire warmer and get the tires up to temperature, and you went out and you could accelerate out and be fairly hard right away, because the temperature drops pretty fast if you're not on the.
Yeah.
And that's why even in current Formula One races, we're always talking about, I didn't get the temperatures into that window.
Yeah.
They've got it such a narrow window now to get them to operate at the perfect temperature.
Yeah.
That there's an art to do that.
Mm.
And so that's where you'd have in fact, we had this conversation. I was at a RDC dinner in Daytona last night and we were talking about certain kind of tires. And when you leave the pits for the 24-hour at Daytona, you go down the pits and then you turn right into the infield, and there's like a horseshoe hairpin that goes right at the end. You can't believe how many people crash at that hairpin because they
not
don't
the right
have the temperature up in the tire.
Right.
And then they get down there and the thing just goes like that, just
Yeah.
goes straight, and
Yeah.
so, and when it's cold like it is now, and it will be this weekend, but now they've got most of them are running a Michelin, which has a better operating window,
Gotcha.
or broader band.
So going back to like, what was I know you told the story, driving the truck to Chicago, and that was kind of like you got out of the rut. Now you're on the track, right? So to say. When did you first make some real money?
Well, Garvin was really good, and he took care of me that year, and then the next year was more of the same, and I got an opportunity. Actually, Garvin was spending a lot of money. I mean, he's paying this out of his pocket.
Yeah.
So to be fair, that's hard.
Right.
I mean, and we were real good buddies with Paul Newman, and he said, "Hey, I want Danny to drive for me for next year." And so that was a good year. Next step for that was good. Then in '83, that was '82, '83, I get a call from Tyrrell, the Formula One guy that I used to live with Jackie Stewart.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Hey, I'm doing a test with 10 drivers at a place called Circuit Paul Ricard in the south of France. It's down near Toulon in the south of France. Bandol, actually, to be more technical, but it's in the south of France." He said, "I'm doing a test, and it's going to be it was like in December.
Yeah.
And the weather in south of France, even in December, can be iffy."
Yeah.
Well, I get invited to the test, and Garvin goes with me, and it's all the best up and coming drivers, and I knew most of the guys and some big names at the time in Formula 2 and things like that, and so I get there, and Ken was a very clever guy, and I'm in my suit. And he goes, "Oh, by the way, you need to sign the contract. So if you get selected,
Yeah.
this is your contract for the next 3 years."
Okay. How old were you at this time?
So right now I'm 33.
Okay.
Okay, so I was
You're younger than I am now.
Okay, most of these guys are 5 or 10 years younger than me,
Gotcha. Okay.
in the group.
Okay.
And so slides the contract out. Garvin's not in there. I'm reading the contract. Go straight to the part, money.
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah. Where's the money?
And I'm looking at it. And so anyway, Garvin walks in, and I'm getting out of my racing overalls. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I can't sign that contract. I can't even live."
Oh, wow.
On that. It was like 10,000 pounds the first year, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know, $15,000. I got to pay my way to the races.
Yeah.
Well, the races are in, South Africa, Europe,
It's impossible.
Japan. I'd spend $15,000 if I went by bicycle for most of these things. And the next year it went from 10,000 to 15 to 25,000 pounds.
Wow.
And in my third year,
Yeah.
I'm going to make 25,000. And by the way, I can't have any outside sponsorship.
Oh, that's crazy.
I can't sell anything on my
Yeah.
suit or anything like that. So I said, "Garvin, I can't live. I'm making more now
Yeah.
than not. I mean, I was making a decent living. I was making a couple $100,000 or something like that. I was okay."
Yeah.
And I said, "I can't do it." He goes, "You can take this two ways." He goes, "Danny," he said, "if you get selected, I'll pay everything. I'll pay all your salary. I'll pay travel. I'll pay everything." So I don't know if I should have taken that as an insult, like, "I don't really think you're going to get elected," or I looked at it as he wanted me to do the test.
Yeah.
So I'd been watching all these guys, "Oh, can you change this?" And because you got to when you get fitted in the seat, you got to have it really comfy, tight.
Yeah.
Because so I'm watching all these guys and everything, but I knew all the mechanics because I'd been a gopher for these guys or with these guys. And I'm the last guy. I'm going at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. And I get in and I said to Roger, he was the chief mechanic. And I said, "Roger, can I change this, change that?" And he leans in and I'm sitting in a car like that. And he just touches my arm like this. And he goes, "Danny, just drive the car." Roger, got it. But I thought I needed to be that way to be professional, to look like I was as professional, as intent.
Right.
because the problem in the Europeans, just sidebar,
Yeah.
is most of them don't take us seriously because all the guys that used to come over and race. Now Mario was different because he was Italian.
Right.
Okay. But most of the guys came over and race, had the money and just came over to race
Yeah.
to spend a summer or
Right.
a year in Europe racing. And we were also where we're more talkative and we could do the stuff. But, you know, you get the guys from some places, they're just like this. They
Yeah.
got blinders on. So anyway, I go out and I got an out lap. So you never raced on the track.
Okay.
Okay. You get an out lap, and they didn't have sims then. So you got an
Right.
out lap, and then you got 8 time laps. And
Out
then
lap is so you can learn the track.
well, an out lap is just you leave the pits
Yeah.
and you come around. So you haven't done a complete lap. And then when you come by the start finish line, that's lap 1.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I got 8 laps.
Yeah.
Okay. 8 laps. And then when I take the checkered flag, is the end lap.
Gotcha.
And then that comes back. So it's a lap, but it's not timed.
Gotcha.
Okay. All 8 laps were faster than everybody in the group.
Wow.
All 8 laps.
Wow.
And typical Ken, he goes, well, you selected yourself on that. And he says, next test is in Brazil in a month's time. Okay. And that was it. That was the conversation. Because typical of all the teams, they're always jetting off. They got to catch the last plane
Yeah.
to get back to London and stuff like that. And Garvin and I went and had kind of a, bit of a celebration and stuff like that. And then we showed up in Brazil.
And these tests are so that you can get selected to be on a team?
Yeah, that's how Ken was known for always finding a young up and coming driver.
Gotcha.
If Ken Tyrrell picked you, he had one of those eyes
Right.
for talent.
Right.
Okay. The way certain people do in football scouting, baseball,
So
whatever.
why would you have another test if you already got selected?
Because they had a big tire test that they did for Goodyear before the beginning of the season, and he wanted to see me with. Then you're in the test with all the teams and all the Formula One drivers.
Ah,
You're there.
Gotcha.
And they want to see. So I said, and it was in outside of Rio, and I said to Garvin, I said, look, we're going early. We're going to get acclimated
yeah.
because it's hot down there. You're
Yeah,
other
yeah.
side of the
It's
equator.
also pretty dangerous in Rio.
Yeah, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I went out for a run out of the hotel in Ipanema, and I come back in and the security's like, "What? Where
Yeah.
have you been?"
Yeah.
So I went for a run on the beach. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
I said, "Look at me. I got shoes on and running shorts.
Yeah.
There is nothing to rob." Okay. I mean, I had a plastic room key. Those are like European hotels. You had to get your room key from the,
Yeah.
and they were laughing. They said, but anyway, so we got down there and we got acclimated. And this was a huge test for Goodyear. They did all their preseason testing. When I say all the preseason testing, this was like a 6-day test
Okay.
for all the teams.
Yeah.
They brought 3 or 4 jumbo jets full of tires.
Oh, wow.
that were junk. They get rid of them. And so anyway, Michele Alboreto was the team leader. Good guy, Italian guy. Was later killed driving for Audi in sports cars, but I mean, fabulous guy. He and I got along great, and they had these things called qualifying tires in '83. They were your regular B compound that's your race tire.
Yeah,
it's a good tire, but the qualifiers were good for 1 lap.
Okay.
And if you put your hand on it when you came in, you couldn't get your hand off.
Gotcha.
And the turbocharged cars were like throwing rubber off of them because they had more power.
Right.
And they gave me a used set of qualifying tires and went and said, and I only drove 10 laps the entire time that I was there. And they gave me a used set of qualifying tires. Said, okay, go out, see what you can do on those. And so they've already been used by Michele.
Yeah.
So the life is pretty much sucked out of them. And I was only 2/10 off of him when they were brand new.
Oh.
And Tyrrell said, okay. He says, I'll send you you're good to go.
And that was your entry into Formula One?
That was my entry into Formula One.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
Yeah. And it was total time in a Formula One car before I showed up for the first practice, the first race was like 10 laps. I mean,
Wow.
20 laps total.
Wow.
You know,
When was your first actual Formula One race?
first race was Joburg, South Africa. I think I think we went to Brazil first, and then we went to Joburg after that. And
that's where the real crowds were, and the
yeah,
real.
this is a real deal.
Like,
This
when
is
did you
practice
start to
fun.
get like the, because you were an all-star. I mean, you know, we were talking the other day. What was the group you said you were part of with Gretzky and Jordan and who was the other person?
That was Future Sports Legends. That didn't come till '85. That was after.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knew me. I could have walked through the paddock naked.
Yeah.
And no fan would have known who I was.
Did people start knowing you after the spin and win?
Oh yeah.
That's when.
Yeah.
That's when.
But actually, they get to know you in the Formula One because there's only 20 drivers.
Right.
And I did. There was a problem with the car in South Africa, and I had to start. South Africa's high, so the turbocharged cars dominated there.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to start last in the pit lane, but I finished 7th.
Okay.
I came through and finished 7th, and then in Monaco, which was would have been about our. Well, I went to do Long Beach. We did a non-championship race at Brands Hatch in England. I finished 2nd and almost won the race.
Wow.
Guy pushed me off on. I passed him around the outside, and he just kind of forced me in the grass coming off the deal. I would have done the same thing. I mean, I knew him. I raced with him for a long time over the years, and so I finished 2nd, which was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
You know. And then, but that was a non-championship race. Then we went to Long Beach, and the guy that won it, John Watson's driving for McLaren, Marlboro McLaren. I was leading him in the race, and something broke on the car, and he won the race.
Okay.
Okay, I wasn't leading the race.
Yeah.
But something happened. But I was leading him by quite a bit. I'm not saying I would have won it, but
Could have.
But I could have.
Yeah.
And then the next race was Monaco, and I qualified dead last. 4 cars didn't make it. Even Watson and Niki Lauda didn't make the race. Pouring with rain in Monaco. And Tyrrell comes up to me and says, which tires do you want? And I was about to say, are you kidding? Because it's raining. I want rain tires. He said, I thought so. We're going to start you on slicks, on dry tires.
Yeah.
And I said, and I'm looking at him like, what? He said, it's going to stop raining. Well, they didn't do pit stops back there.
Yeah.
They could do them, but they weren't set up the way they do now.
Yeah.
Where you would have just gone until it got drier and come in and change the tires.
Right.
And probably the scariest couple of laps for the first 20 laps, scary as shit because you're just sliding around everywhere, trying not to hit the fence and stuff like that. And I think, I am going so frigging slow. And then I come around a corner, the guy's in the wall. I think, well, maybe I'm not going that slow, you know. And I went from last to 5th.
Wow.
And finished 5th in the race. And that gave me my first world championship points because they gave points down to 6th. Now they go down to 10th place. They only went to 6th place then.
Gotcha.
And that was a big thing. Plus at Monaco, plus in the conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then he was sponsored by Benetton, and Benetton wanted to be with a turbocharged car because they realized that the normally aspirated Cosworth cars were not competitive enough.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyrrell didn't want it. I tried to get him to join forces with another guy that had a turbo, and he wouldn't do it. And so he said I might have to take a pay driver, and I might not be able to honor your contract. So I was going to be out of a drive after 1 year, which turns out I ended up. So I was living in Europe, and I went back. I had a home in Colorado, in Aspen, and I went back there. When I say a home, I had a kind of a small apartment.
I'm envisioning a giant house on a mountain. Okay.
I did later on have a house there, but I had a apartment that a friend of mine owned or building owned,
Okay.
and it was a rental.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I still had it, but and I stopped at an IndyCar race in Phoenix, and just to see some people and so forth. And I saw this guy, Doug Shearson, who had the Domino's Pizza sponsorship, who I raced with and against in some of the junior formulas. And he says, hey, Howdy Holmes is going to retire and go run the family business. He says, what are you doing next year? He says, I want you to drive for me.
Wow.
And then literally Tyrrell hadn't told me about this yet.
Yeah.
And I literally got home to Colorado, and he calls and says, "Hey, I might not be able to." And I said, "Well, when are you going to tell me?
Yeah.
When can you make the decision?" He said, "Well, it might not be till February." Well, if you don't have your drive set up in November, December,
Yeah.
you're not getting a drive in February of anybody that you want to drive for.
Right.
And so I went to see Frank in Berkeley, and he and I stayed up like 2 nights in a row. Well, what about if we do this? What about if we do that? What if Ken doesn't do it? What about this offer over here? And I called Doug and said, "Okay, we're in."
Yeah.
And first year I won 3 races.
Wow.
For him.
What was the difference in Indy versus Formula One?
They're both look similar in the day.
Yeah.
The IndyCar was turbocharged, ran a different tire, steel brakes, and ran on alcohol.
Okay.
Okay. And the IndyCar was 300 pounds heavier than the Formula One car.
Similar power?
In the end, we were actually a little bit more than the Formula One car because of the turbocharger.
Gotcha.
And then you had different setups for ovals because less downforce, especially the fast ovals.
Yeah.
And then road courses, you had bigger wings and stuff like that. Just technical. But they didn't drive. It was just a heavier car. Didn't stop as good as the Formula One. A lot of that's because of weight.
Right.
And so they weren't that dissimilar to drive.
But Indy, so you won 3 races that season.
So I won the Pocono 500, big oval.
Yeah.
I won Sanair, small oval, 1 mile oval, and then I won Cleveland road course. So there's street courses, Long Beach, Toronto, Cleveland, and then there's road courses, which are places like Laguna Seca, purpose-built tracks.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's the difference between a road course and a street course, and then the ovals and small ovals.
Which one of the 3 were your favorite to do?
I was more of a road racer. I mean, that was all my background. Everything in Europe was road race and that. But I won.
Wait, the roads were the ones that were designed for racing, or were the street designed for racing?
The road courses were designed
for racing, but they weren't just ovals.
They were a purpose-built track,
Okay.
Designed up, down. Laguna Seca in California, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, Road America, Elkhart Lake, Mid-Ohio, Watkins Glen up in New York. Those were purpose-built racetracks, only for racing. Whereas Long Beach, they built around the streets. Toronto, they built in the streets.
Gotcha.
There was an argument over which, but when you had people in downtown Toronto, it was really cool because it was a captive audience and stuff like that. Much tighter, twistier, concrete walls, no runoff area.
Right.
So you had to be really precise. And then the ovals, but I won all 3 500 milers. Won Pocono twice, Michigan, Indy. So I had the trifecta.
Yeah.
There's only 4 of us, I think, that won all 3 500 miles at the time. I don't know what the status is on that, and short ovals and stuff like that.
Is 500 miles the longest race?
Yeah, in IndyCar.
So that's like a 3-hour.
Well, if you have a lot of yellows or stuff like that, it can be 4.5 hours.
Wow.
It's just you run it as fast as you can.
Yeah.
But I think for 500 miles, I averaged like 183 miles an hour.
What was your pre-race like? Did you drink coffee? Did you have anything to, give you energy?
Don't laugh. I was big on to diet and what I ate during the week and all that stuff. But believe it or not, before the race, because all the races started in the afternoon, my favorite, PB&J.
Really?
PB&J, because there was no. It was too hard to get a good pasta in the paddock or anything like that.
Right.
Later, when I drove for Alfa Romeo, they had a chef and they flew in all the pasta.
Yeah.
It was a different story.
Carbs.
But the PB&J was, never had to worry about anxiety. Not that I got it, but your nerves are going. You're stressed before the thing. PB&J gave me the fix, the energy. I mean, I'd have breakfast, I'd have egg whites in the morning and stuff like that. But by the time the race starts, it's 2:00 in the afternoon.
So no coffee, nothing, no
I
stimulants.
don't drink coffee.
Never have.
No, makes me sick.
Wow.
I drink tea. I mean, it's something in the coffee. I don't know what it is. And then when I was with Red Bull, I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid, you know,
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah.
And
So you're drinking the Red Bull when you were with.
but I never, when I was with Red Bull, I wasn't racing
Gotcha.
at that time.
Yeah.
No, because you don't need any adrenaline rush.
Right.
There's
There's enough.
There's enough.
Yeah.
You don't need, if anything, you need more. Just
Yeah.
and I hydrated. I learned so much about dehydration because think about it. Okay, you're an athlete.
Yeah.
You're trying. So you got 2 layers of long underwear on.
Yeah.
Okay, a 3-layer of suit. Okay, then you put a balaclava on.
Yeah.
Then you got a helmet on top of that, and you got gloves on that. And you're down in a car. You got no drink bottle then,
Yeah.
because they didn't have the place to put them, and the technology wasn't advanced and stuff like that. And you're racing some places where it's 95 degrees and 90% humidity,
Wow.
and you're in this thing, and you know you're sweating
Yeah.
like a banshee.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd lose between 6 and 8 pounds of water weight.
It's like being in a sauna.
It is. In fact, when I used to train, when I was in Kentucky for the races, you know, when I got into that training thing, I'd wear long underwear, I'd wear sweatshirts and sweatsuits, bib overalls,
Yeah.
a beanie cap, put gloves on, and I'd go cut wood
Oh wow.
and out in the heat of the
So
day.
how did you stay hydrated, or at least relatively hydrated?
I hydrated.
Because you also
I
don't want to have to pee.
I started hydrating on Monday.
Yeah.
For a weekend race, because remember, you got practices on Friday and Saturday, so you're using up some of the hydration. And I'd hydrate all the way through, because in hydration, it's about soaking the glands.
Right.
It's not about taking that and filling my stomach.
Gotcha.
It's soaking the glands
How do you do that?
just by drinking water for 4 days before, and then maintaining that water drink while I'm doing the practice and the
So
qualifying.
you're drinking a lot of water 4 days before.
lot.
What about electrolytes and salts?
Yeah, there was. I didn't like salts.
Yeah.
I don't really love salt.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that much in the way of electrolytes. And the problem is that when they came out with Gatorade, and
Yeah.
that was, you know, well, Gatorade's got so much sodium in it. It's
Yeah.
got a lot of sugar in it,
Yeah.
and all that. I was more of a water guy, and I like the taste of water.
Yeah.
So I just did it like that.
How much water would you drink for the 4 days before the practices?
I'd be getting up 6 times at night to take a leak.
Gotcha.
and stuff
So you're
like that.
soaking the glands.
Yeah.
And then by the time race day comes,
Well, you dehydrate some during the thing, so you can't get it quite saturated back the way you were
yeah.
because of practice days and qualifying days. So Friday and Saturday, we're in the car for 6-7 hours in the 3 days,
Yeah.
and then I try to soak it back up at night,
Yeah.
and then race day. I usually found a Porta John or something before the start of the race.
Have you ever had to use the bathroom during a race?
One time.
Did you just piss yourself?
Yeah, just go for it. Because it was at Indy in 92, and it was like this temperature.
Yeah.
So you get hot in the car while we were running, and then a yellow would come out, and now you're driving around behind the pace car,
Yeah.
freezing.
Yeah. Oh.
And everybody, I talked to a whole bunch of people after that. I said, yeah, I just peed in the car. And then when I did Baja, you did a catheter, but it was like a condom with a tube on the end.
Oh, really?
And you just run down, and of course these things, there's holes in the floor and everything,
Yeah.
and you just run down, and it just, because I mean, I did one stint in Baja one year. I drove for 9 hours.
Wow.
And you remember those the Camelbacks?
Yeah.
So what I'd do is I'd take the Camelback, I'd take the sack itself, I'd cut everything else off,
Yeah.
and I'd stick it down in the suit
Yeah.
and fill it up.
Yeah.
And now I used electrolytes then, and some things, there was some little things that you could do, but it wasn't a 5-hour energy type thing,
Right.
or just what do they call them? Anyway, and I'd put a little bit of that in the water, and then because you wear a big bib around to keep the dust out,
Yeah.
I'd run that
straw
up
right up
underneath
there.
here, and I'd put it right there in the corner of my mouth.
Wow.
And I just about every mile and a half,
Take a little sip.
that much,
Yeah.
thimbleful,
Just consistent little drips of hydration.
kept me hydrated
Yeah.
for the whole thing. And I'd do the same thing before it. I was always hydrating up until the event, but then when I got in, and then at some stage during the run, all of a sudden you'd go, I gotta pee,
Yeah.
you know. And then once it started, it's hard to do it the first time because you're sitting a little bit with your butt down because
Yeah.
you're in like a Recaro seat type
Yeah,
thing that
yeah.
you've got with your butt down a little bit. So, and to get it
Yeah.
to go up
Yeah.
and out. But once it started, then it was really,
Yeah.
just kind of.
So then you're focusing on trying to pee while you're driving.
Yeah,
It's
but
gotta
then
be-
the system just takes. Then
Yeah.
you don't. Once it goes the first time, I found I knew you knew you were doing it, but
Yeah.
you never
You
thought
don't
about
think
it.
about it anymore.
Just think about it.
That's things that people don't think about in this
No.
sport. So what was the moment that you went, like, when did you realize, like, I'm actually a rock star in this industry?
I don't know if you ever really believe that. I mean, they.
When did you start to get recognized and being featured in magazines?
80, the real big stuff. I mean, I was in the motorsports magazines if you had success in the junior formulas
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But it really started about 83 when I was doing Formula One because, American doing Formula One. And then I'll tell you a very interesting story if you don't mind. A guy, so as I said, we're way before streaming, social media,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And the thing that I realized was one of the lessons was that cat neck steel lentil wasn't just about that. But I realized early on, if you got 3 drivers, all look roughly the same, all okay looking, all got a number of wins and stuff like that. What sets me apart to the sponsor? What sets me apart? That sponsor says, I want Danny Sullivan, not, whatever. And it's publicity. It's impressions.
Right.
It's in these things. It's in this stuff. So at Long Beach, after the Formula One race, Luciano Benetton, head of Benetton, and Luciano said, meet me in Westwood at this time. And Luciano's English was like my Italian. We could go to dinner and be okay.
Yeah.
Just pig English, pig
Yeah,
Italian, get back, that
Yeah.
word, and we could have a nice time.
Yeah.
But now he wanted to talk business. So I called his buddy of mine. Claude spoke 5 languages, Swiss guy, lived in LA, sharp guy. And I said, would you come with me as to translate? Which Luciano was really happy for.
Yeah.
And you remember how we used to, maybe you don't, they used to have all these, remember those where you could buy the newspapers and they were those boxes on the side of things?
In New York
Okay.
City, they had them everywhere. Yeah.
And they had, in Westwood, UCLA, they had all these boxes. I mean,
Yeah.
they had 20 of them, USA Today, New York Times,
Right.
Wall Street Journal, everything. And Luciano's standing on there and he's got all these papers stacked up on the top of one of the boxes. And he goes, I see your name in the paper and I see Tyrrell, the team's name in the paper. I don't see Benetton.
Yeah.
And he said, how do I get Benetton's name in the paper
Yeah.
more? And Claude, who'd been translating, he just told him, he said, you got to get Danny a PR firm to do it, to get his name out there and your name as part of the program.
Right.
And he said, you get somebody, somebody for Danny? And he goes, yeah, I got the right guy. And they didn't translate. They had the conversation.
Yeah.
And then Claude translated. And they took me to this guy named Alan Neerob at a place called Rogers and Cowan,
Okay.
which is a big entertainment firm and still one of the big entertainment PR firms. They do movie launch. They're a big PR firm. Alan, by the way, is now CEO of the
Okay.
company. And the only other athlete he had in the whole thing was Ozzie Smith,
Okay.
shortstop for the St. Louis
Okay.
Cardinals, right? And he didn't know anything about racing. Alan didn't know anything about racing, but he knew about PR
Yeah.
and how to leverage it and manipulate. And this guy was brilliant. and he said, okay, but I'm going to need a lot of your time
Yeah.
to do this,
Yeah.
because I can't just send the guy a clip or
Yeah.
something. Hey, you got to talk to. But he knew how to leverage. Like, he had Victoria Principal as one of his clients. Okay, when she was big deal in Dallas.
Okay.
And People Magazine wanted to do a story.
Who was she?
Her name was Victoria Principal.
Was she an athlete or
Actress?
actress?
Me and Ozzy were the only two jocks in the.
Gotcha.
If you put me in the jock category, but we were
Yeah.
the only ones in that. But he had Robert Wagner. I mean, he's got Mel Gibson, Denzel Washington. You know, he handles. I mean,
all the celebrities.
He's a big dog. So they'd say, "Hey, we want to do a story on Victoria and People Magazine." He said, "Okay." He said, "I'd like you to do me a favor. I'd like you to do a story. I've got this young American race car driver in Formula One and stuff like that." And they said, so that he knew how to leverage it. And so it was like, okay, we'll do that. And then, so next thing you know, I'm in People Magazine. Okay. I'm in Women's Wear Daily. Don't laugh. Women's Wear Daily is so big to women. Your wife would know what it was back in the day. I don't even know if it still exists. He had me on the cover of Playgirl. I mean, he had me.
So you just became the ladies' man overnight.
He did everything. I did Good Morning America 7 times in 9 months.
Wow.
And I remember Jill London was the hostess on the thing. She said, "Danny, we'd love to see you. What are you back for this time?" I mean, I did the Carson Tonight Show. I did Letterman. I did
wow.
all these shows, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he had me on. So next thing you know, it's like, it's just, he exploded. So in '84, when I drove for Shearson, I won those 3 races, and I was negotiating. I only had a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
So I was negotiating a contract, and they were really happy with me. I was really happy with them. And Penske called Dr. Faulkner and said, "Hey, Frank, does Danny have a contract for next year? We were interested to talk to him." I said, "I don't know. Let me find out." So he come back and he says, "No, he's in the negotiation state." Penske's on the phone. Boom, whisked me to New York. Does his contract. Boom, boom. We're done. Okay, and I actually took a pay cut but it was Penske.
Yeah.
And Doug and I had been friends, but he didn't have the resources of Roger. And I asked him one time later why, and he says Alan Sr. was great. He was in his heyday, and Rick Mears. And he said Al would not show up for most of the sponsor stuff. He'd just book it and never even show up. They want your exposure. You've created this, whole different, nobody was doing it.
Right.
Nobody was. When I showed up, they go, "Fuck is this guy?"
Yeah. Yeah.
But the sponsors, which was the whole goal,
They saw you everywhere.
they loved it.
Yeah.
And I was in. I was the longest athlete for Ray-Ban. I was with Ray-Ban for 10 years. I was 17 years with Hugo Boss.
Oh, wow. I
For
like that
these
brand
guys.
a lot, actually.
Yeah,
Great brand.
so they were, but I work. You work it.
Yeah.
These aren't just, "Hey, thanks, really good."
Yeah.
Take 10.
Yeah.
And do it. It's a lot of work. In fact, I had a stretch. I was single, but I had a stretch of 14 years. Okay, where I was 48 weeks a year on the road.
Wow.
And
That's insane.
I loved every minute of it because I had that little place,
Yeah.
and I had a hotel that I used in New York.
Yeah.
And because you're in Ohio and the
Yeah.
next race is in Toronto, do I really want to fly back to the West Coast?
Yeah.
Come back, do this all the time on the plane? I knew people there. I had a gym where I had it all set up. The hotel would keep stuff for me there. And so it was like,
Yeah.
and that's how I met so many people.
Yeah.
Because I was always.
How did you remember, like, whenever I go to cities, I'm like, I feel like I know someone there. How did you remember everyone you knew in all these different places? Did you have like a Rolodex or something? Or
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm going to
I
this city.
keep it up, and I had it was funny. One of the guys, when we were doing the Can-Am, so later on, I got to the point where I got pretty busy, and I'd introduced this friend of mine, a girl in Kentucky that was roommates with my cousin at college, anyway. And she came to one of the races, and I introduced, and she had got connected with this close friend of mine that was later became the editor publisher at Auto Week. but he was a journalist at the time. And he lived in California, and she wanted to go to California. She said, hey, I'm not willing to go out there just to live with him. I got to do something. And I thought, well, would you think you could be my assistant? I mean, I needed somebody to help with, bookings and, just BS stuff, just keeping the schedule and appointments and, and she goes, well, what are you paying? I said, what do you need? And so we talked. So she became my assistant. She was my assistant for a long time.
Oh, wow.
And it was fantastic. That made it where I was capable of being able to do a lot of that because you had to have somebody.
Yeah.
And I had an accountant that was taking care of the credit card bills and stuff like that. You can't just, I'm not that good or that efficient.
Yeah.
And my wife will verify that with you.
Yeah.
But so I ended up kind of creating this little structure. And as I became more successful, I needed that just to handle it.
Of course.
And
when did you kind of take the leap from, racing to getting into business?
It really started, so the Benetton thing, Luciano and I we were great buddies. I really liked Luciano. And that was 83. Okay. And in 83, he said, I wanted you as an American because we want to open the American market.
Right.
Okay. I said, great. And I said, what are you doing about this, that, and the stores? And I said, well, what are you going to do about stores?
Yeah.
Can I get some?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
What type of stores were these?
Benetton had their own clothing. They were really famous for all their colored sweaters.
Okay.
The United Colors of Benetton.
Okay.
And they made these wild colors and stuff, sweaters, and these guys were massive.
Yeah.
For a long time, and they made so much money, and then they invested in so much. So you've been to Italy, right?
Yeah.
They own a third of all the highways in Italy.
Highways?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know how they're all toll roads in Italy?
Yeah.
They own a third of them.
Wow. Okay.
You know who owns the government owns a third, they own a third, and the Catholic Church. Because think about it, a toll road.
Yeah.
It's a cash cow.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah. It's just nobody's not driving.
Yeah.
So they were investing in different stuff. And I said, so I had no idea about it, but I knew somebody that owned a mall in California that they're, anyway. I never got involved with them, but the daughter did, and she ended up with like 30 or 40 stores.
Oh, wow.
This was a guy owned Fashion Island, and so they, his daughter wanted, anyway. And then, so that was 83. And then when I went to work for, Shearson, and Doug was out of a small town, Adrian, Michigan, and had inherited some money and stuff like that. So then when I signed with Penske, Roger's a pretty successful guy. He wasn't what he is now, but he was growing. He had car dealerships and stuff like that. So I talked to him about any business opportunities that might come up, and that's where I started thinking. And I'll tell you a funny story. I won't tell you the numbers, but I said, well, can I get some stock in the holding company? And it wasn't public. It's not publicly traded.
Yeah.
Still to this day, it's not publicly traded. And he goes, well, you can buy it.
Yeah.
But he said, but yeah, you can have it. So it was not very much. It was a couple bucks a share or something like that. So I bought 15, 20,000 shares or something like that. And I can't tell you what that deal turned out to be.
It was a good one? Great one.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it wasn't so much that. Roger helped me get into connection with Lexus. I became a spokesperson for them. I got a dealership, different things. So I was a Lexus dealer in Jacksonville.
Oh.
And then because of Boss, I had a Boss store in Toronto, Canada. But only because I partnered up with somebody that was with Boss, that knew what they were doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I could get the location because of my relationship with Boss. So it was that. So it was just trying to leverage what I had.
Right.
For the future. Because by the way, get hurt.
Yeah.
It's all done.
Yeah.
It's all done.
Yeah.
And I've got an expensive lifestyle at that stage.
Right.
I mean, I didn't, but you know what I'm saying. You're just you all of a sudden that stuff's gone.
Yeah, you gotta plan for the future.
Exactly. And so I'm thinking, okay, what do I do when I get out? Which was one of the reasons I wanted to do the Lexus store, because it was Jacksonville, and I saw myself eventually moving there. And then the guy that I knew, the managing partner, Bob had a heart attack and died. And then the money, guys, he put in another manager. And at some stage, he said, I want to own it all. And so he said, what do you want to get out? And it was good. I didn't want to I said, I don't really want to get out.
Yeah.
He says, well, I own more than you do.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to, you know, last thing you want to do is get in with it.
Yeah.
Doesn't match with a partner.
Yeah.
Because then it's never going to be good.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
And,
Just make a deal.
yeah. And he just said, what do you want? I told him. He said, okay, here, just thank you.
So you were really leveraging a lot of these relationships that you made and the respect that you had
All
for
I
those
had.
people to connect dots and just help make other people money and be part of it.
Yeah. That's all I had was but I had the connection to get in to where a lot of people couldn't get in.
Right.
Like when I did the Red Bull distributorship, these guys almost didn't even know what Red Bull was.
Right.
And they had no idea how to get it. So, and we went up against, 15 other people.
Right.
But I was friends with the owner,
Right.
Dietrich, and
So the relationships have really went a long way for you.
relationships are everything.
What would your advice be? A lot of the listeners are younger and they're, trying to start businesses or figure out their path. What would be your advice on relationships?
That you have to develop relationships everywhere you go, and you can never underestimate who that person is when you meet them.
Yeah.
And they may not be somebody that big or that important, but if you're legitimate and have a real friendship with, you got to be really friends. You can't just go in and get somebody's business card and put it in your Rolodex
right.
and say, you've got to develop relationships with it. You never know who that person's going to turn into or what deal they're going to do or what opportunity may come your way, even if that person's already established.
Right.
Because they may say, hey, I've got an opportunity.
They think of you.
You want to participate in it.
Right.
But you've got to be legitimate. You've got to be, you can't just say I'm stacking my Rolodex in there.
100%.
And you've got to maintain those relationships. You got to talk to people and call people and then the next thing you know, somebody calls you out of the blue and says, hey, I was thinking about you the other day.
Yeah.
Or you might be a good fit for our organization to be a spokesperson for it. So, that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Or you go back and you go, hey, I've got this opportunity. I'm going to drive for this team, for example, since we're talking about racing. And you're looking around, you're going, I've got somebody that might be a fit for this team. I was the guy that took Hugo Boss to Penske, who's still with them.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great
Since 1985.
Yeah.
They're still a partner with Penske.
Yeah.
And it was just, they were the right group. Penske was the right group for Boss.
Right.
They had the right image. They had the clean cut, the clothes fit. Roger wasn't a Tommy Hilfiger.
Right.
I'm not knocking Tommy Hilfiger, but they weren't a match in his corporate look type thing. Yeah. And so I think that's the advice that I would give. And as we said earlier in the conversation about you never know who you meet. It's always easier to be friendly to them than not.
Right.
And
so just be real, maintain relationships. Yeah. Like my experience has been, I've made lots of relationships, and then years later, they've turned into things that have amplified both of our lives. It doesn't always happen right away.
Absolutely. It could be.
Almost never does.
It almost never does. And you never know when you might be able to help that person out for something. They get in a jam or, and it's legit. And you say, hey, well, come on, you need some help too. It sometimes can go both ways. Some of the kids that I helped in racing, I didn't have the money to sponsor them, but I had the connection to open the door for them, to put them with, XYZ or something. I'd say, like, remember Mario and Al Sr. telling Garvin Brown that story, hey, help this kid, he's good. Yeah. I've had the benefit of being able to do that.
Right. Paying it forward. That's great.
So
I'm curious, like, when you're, winning these big races, you're in the spotlight, there's this high. It's almost like, a musician on the stage, there's this unbelievable high they get. And then regular life doesn't give them that same high. And a lot of people turn to drugs or whatever it may be. Right. Have you ever kind of experienced that where you had these great highs and then life was like, well, what's going to match that?
I think racing in general was the high.
Yeah.
Because, the thing about a musician, you just mentioned a musician, they're performing tonight and then maybe 2 nights later or 3. They get the high all the time.
Right.
We get it when we win races or when we're doing good. I mean, don't forget, it's still a high for us driving a car, but the whole goal is to win.
Right.
And win races or run at the front.
Right.
You got to be competitive.
But what about after your racing career, though? I mean,
well,
you don't have that anymore.
I got it more from just the projects that I got involved in, from Red Bull to the Lexus to different things, just the business side of being out there. And I got to do this. I've got a thing called Racers Roundtable right now. We did, it's on MAV TV. I'm not trying to pitch it. I'm just saying that's where it is. And we did all these interviews. Tony Stewart and I did, basically, we're just telling stories amongst a bunch of racers.
Yeah. From
sprint car guys, stock car guys, drag racers, Formula people, IndyCar, all this kind of stuff. And a lot of them who I knew, but a lot of them I didn't. But it was just, and so these opportunities come along to do that. And for me, we did 17 shows in 2 days.
Wow.
17 shows. So think about this. You're going to do 17 of these in 2 days.
That's a lot.
Now,
that's a lot of shows.
And so, but the result was so much fun, and everybody had such a good time, and the stories are fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and then you have a day like we did the other day playing golf.
Yeah.
With 2 great guys.
Yeah.
That were, I'm not saying us. I mean, the other two people we played with, the great guys. We had a great time. Weather was not very good, but we had a great walk out there, conversations, talking about different things. And I think that's what happens in life. I was open to go to those different cities and the off thing. It was also my personality. It's not for everybody. Right. I know a lot of people, couch potatoes.
Yeah.
They just wanted to go back to their house, turn on the TV, watch whatever, and they'll show up there. Great talent, great drivers, but that's not for everybody.
Right.
But you said something earlier. You still have to be yourself. You can't manufacture your conversation. You can't fake to be a friend.
Oh yeah.
You've got to be legitimate with people.
100%.
And the other biggest thing from my perspective, the racing I did, I raced all over the world.
Yeah.
I met people, all walks of life, all different nationalities. And for me, it gave me a better perspective of what it's really like living in some of those countries. I did a series down in New Zealand. I was there 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Driving through the whole countryside, and it's like, wow.
I actually did that too. It's funny. I was in New Zealand for 2.5 months.
No way.
Driving through the country, not racing through the country, of course, but I got to do that too. Funny.
Well, I was going to different racetracks to work, to do my profession.
It's amazing though. But it's amazing immersing yourself in the culture of these different places, meeting the people in these different places. It's a beautiful, great memories.
It's an eye opener too, because their perspective a lot on life, or just how they live, you kind of makes you take a step back and go, wow, that's interesting, and I think that's one of the things that racing gave me. But I think that's one of the problems a lot in America, that we're pretty myopic and we get in our own little zone.
Yeah,
I was in my zone. My zone just happened to cover more of the world. But I think that we don't understand a lot of what's going on around other places in the world.
100%.
Because we look at it and go, well, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You don't have water? You don't have air conditioning?
Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
What do you mean you don't have food?
Yeah.
Type thing.
Yeah. And then a lot of the things that you learn about what's going on isn't even true anyway. And you don't know if it's true. So you have this doubt about everything you hear.
Exactly. So I think that I think if a young person, I don't care if you're racing or whatever you're doing, but if you go into it with wide eyes open, looking and trying to learn and understand a lot of that stuff, I think that's
excited to see what happens.
Yeah.
I wanted to just kind of, as we're going through the end here, you've been married for what, how many years?
Almost 29.
29 years. How did you make the transition from, the ladies' man, in these magazines, living this incredible bachelor life, to settling down for the last 29 years?
It just was the right one. It was just.
How old were you when you got married?
Almost your. I was 47.
You were 47.
46. Yeah, but when I met Brenda, and I'm also older now.
Yeah.
So I've lived a certain life and so forth. So you get where, I don't always say you're set in your ways, but you're looking at different things or personality traits or whatever it was. And when I met Brenda, it was almost like the first night that day we actually physically went out.
Yeah.
Not phone calls or stuff like that. It was like, oh my God, I could ask her right now.
Yeah.
It was just like, this is kind of the one. I'm not saying everybody always gets that.
Yeah.
But this was just, we were on the same page. We liked a lot of the same things. Her mentality, just everything like that. You've met her. She's a lot brighter than me and stuff like that. But it just was one of those things. It was like not even a question. Everything else was stopped. I think, again, that's a blessing. I don't think everybody always gets that.
Yeah.
And I think that was also because I was older. I'd waited a lot. I didn't jump in just because, okay, this feels good, let's go. I took my time. And that was a lot because of my career. It wasn't for everybody. I was on the road all the time.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I like that.
Yeah.
I like doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And
you still get to do a bit of that now with the show.
Yeah. No, I mean, she's very good about that.
Yeah.
But you also get to the point where now I got somebody that I don't want to necessarily just go on the road all the time.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that a lot because I was still racing in the beginning of our relationship.
Right.
And we moved a lot. I think the first 10 years we were together, we had 10 homes, and some of them overlapped and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then we said we had this opportunity, so we picked up, moved to France, and and we were there 6 years, and because we could, because we hadn't started a family, we didn't have a family, we weren't going to do that, and she was again like-minded. It's like, yeah, let's try that,
Yeah.
And so I think that's just making take your time and figure it out. And a lot of people want to get married early and have a family. I am nothing against any of that.
Yeah.
It just wasn't in my DNA.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately you've got to be pretty true to yourself and not be afraid to say, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
And follow your own path. Not always right, and it doesn't always work out, but you're going to learn from those mistakes and maybe get you back to where there's a path that does work.
If you got to start over again, would you do anything differently in life?
I don't think so. I mean, there's always things you go back and go, gosh, I wish I hadn't done that, or wish I hadn't said that.
They usually lead you somewhere that you're like, I'm glad that happened.
If I look back, I mean, I joked recently. I said, I think Tom Selleck might have said it. I was a overnight 11-year sensation. So I would have liked to have had some success a little earlier on, but I'm not so sure I would have learned as much of what not to do a little later on. And look, you always go back and go, gosh, I wish I'd gone left instead of right, or wish I hadn't done as. Hindsight's always pretty good vision, 2020. But if I had to do it again and I was 21 years old again and said the same thing, I'd be right back at Jim Russell School and I'm trying my best.
Man, what an incredible story, and really cool to, I've known you for a while. We've never really gotten this deep before, but everyone I meet in the neighborhood always has great things to say about you. Oh, you gotta know Danny, blah blah blah.
Oh,
So it's
that's
really cool
very kind.
to dive in with you. To end things off, the world is in a place it's in now, between politics and social media and just the environment we live in. For younger people out there that are trying to navigate this life of theirs, do you have any words of advice that you think would be powerful for them?
Well, I think it's just as exciting a time as your time, my time, and so forth. I think the biggest thing you got to be careful on in social media is just if you're going to write something, if it's controversial, put it out, sleep on it.
Yeah.
Before you do it, because it never goes away.
Yeah.
That story is in the cloud forever.
Yeah.
And, you don't know what might happen later on in terms of job opportunity, career opportunity, relationship opportunity, that you've gone and said something because you were angry.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to be, you could say something, people might not remember it correctly, but even print, you had to be careful in those days because somebody can still pull up the social media is just a more advanced form of the print.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the single biggest thing. But I look at it too. It's I don't care which side of the politics you're on. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I think the hard part now is to get truth.
Yeah.
To get the real story.
Right.
But I don't care which side you're on. I think it's really hard to get that. And that's always the one where I think you got to be a little bit more cautious. I mean, back in my day, we could almost believe, the news broadcast or what was in the paper was usually pretty accurate. Nowadays, I don't know where you go to get that. You just got to keep researching. But I also think it's with AI and all the things that you did. I would have never even thought. My generation wouldn't have thought about that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there are opportunities out there that I have no idea that everybody's, thinking about. But it's so exciting what you can create now.
Yeah.
And go for it. I mean,
I take it as be excited for what opportunities are there as opposed to being fearful of what you might miss.
Right. Or don't be too negative on either side, on the politics side, on either side of the aisle, because they're all got their own opinion and they're all trying to do the right thing, whether you agree with it or not. But you can't say their side is always wrong.
100%.
So.
Well, Danny, thank you so much.
Good.
Incredible
I really
conversation.
appreciate it.
Had a lot of fun today.
Likewise. Thank you.